weet ons daar by die boere aangekom het Shawn altyd gesê, dis 'n Engelse Matthee en ek is Afrikaanse Warren. Weet, hy is van die Antichrist en ek is nou. You know, one of the things that our trips convinced me of, that our Lord Jesus Christ has an incredible sense of humor. To put Shawn Warren and Keith Pastoor together was just, and the only thing that kept us together was that we both worshipped and loved Jesus Christ. Because we were so different. Although my father was Afrikaans and I was ook 'n priesie man and alles, but yeah, I get quite emotional when I think about it. It was about 9, I was reminded who came up to me 9 years ago. Wie het na my gekom? Daar. Die naam nou weer? Annette, ja. That she was here when I arrived for that first trip. It was just here. And I bought this Rolls Royce Firefly that I renamed Funk. And I could see that your congregation, seker van julle, looked at me, and I don't know what Shawn had told you about me. But he had obviously told me I'm a city boy, ek is 'n advokaat, ek is. So they sort of looked at me and they smiled. And the first day there, under just before we go up the Seaback Pass, he starts getting a phone call. And the next 2, 3, 4 days, now I listened to the conversation. En al wat ek hoor is, nee, hy is nog okay. Nee, hy is nog okay. and about the third day, now look, I hadn't ridden a horse for 20 years, I wasn't horse fit anymore. So my hands, I started getting blisters. Weet, jy's in die saal van 10 uur in die, te maklik 10 uur, op 'n dag. And I say, Shawn, I'm getting blisters here. He looks at me with a smile. He says, is die advokaat se handjie seer? En is die laaste keer wat ek gekla het. But I'm going to get it back on him now. And, he was just turned 40 then, so he should really say "wim" to me. And I recently turned 50, so he's getting a bit older, but you still got about 8 years to go before I did that ride, that 3-week ride. But we were supposed to do a ride tomorrow. That was the original plan for about 4 or 5 days. So I phoned Shawn a few days ago. And I sort of hear, he talks about his back's out and he has to plant these fancy English plants. What are they? Pansies or something. And I say, Shawn, so I'm saying to you guys, you must look after, he's getting old. He's 50, hy word oud, so you must look after. Dis my handjies, maar hy word nou oud. Now, I arrived that day when I phoned Shawn, and I was going through a tough time in Cape Town. I struggled, and I said, Shawn, have you read Commando? And, Denise Reitz's book, when him and Jannie Smuts went from the Transvaal all the way up to the Northern Cape. And he had read that. So I said, let's do the middle part of their trip, which is sort of from this area to Carlottsdorp, Ladysmith. And I didn't think he'd take me seriously. And immediately on the phone, he didn't consult with his wife or anything, he just said yes. And a few months later, there we started. But I had a different picture. I needed to deal with all the stresses I was going through, and I was working through issues. That was my agenda. The first day at the bottom of the Seaback Pass, where we slept there in the veld, I realized this man had a totally different agenda. And let me read you what I was thinking, what passage sums up what his agenda was. And I saw that the first day. En ek moes maar gou aanpas. It's from Mark. And Jesus called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He charged them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in the belts. Ons het daarom kos gehad vir 'n dag. Partykeer. Maar ons het baie Coke gedrink. But to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. Ek het 2 onderbroeke gevat. And he said to them, whenever you enter a house, stay there until you depart from there. And if any place will not receive you, they will not listen to you. When you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and proclaimed that people should repent. And they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. And Jesus said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. En jy weet, daar is dae gewees waar jy in die saal is nou van 10, 12 uur. Ek is toe omtrent 58 jaar oud gewees, dink ek, 59. Is swaar. Is swaar, en dan soek ons nou 'n plek, waar gaan ons slaap? Dis meestal in die veld gewees. En daar sien ek, en nou wil ek net 'n plek kry, want ek was die koffiemaker gewees. Ek was sy lekkie eintlik gewees. Hy was die pastoor, ek was die lekkie gewees. En dan soek ons 'n plek, dan sien ek daar stap 'n ouetjie daar langs die gryspad. Hy's heeltemal alleen. En ek sê, oh no. Want ek weet wat kom. Ek gaan nie daai slaapplek kry nie, voordat hierdie man, Jesus Christus, met daai man gedeel het. En hy begin met die geselskap, en dan gou, dan weet hy strategies, weet jy kan sien hy's 'n parabat gewees, weet hy weet hoe om dinge te bekruip. En dan moet ek maar net sit en wag. Jy weet, want ek weet, hy gaan nie ophou voordat hierdie man of tot bekering gekom het, of of wat nogal. But what a privilege, what a privilege. It is the birth of, and if there are a couple of things I'd like to share and leave you with as his congregation, and it's wonderful that you as a congregation, he's involved you in that process, and he takes you out to these different places, and he always tells me, and I know, like every photo there almost, I knew exactly where it was. I could visualize it. You know, what we call Miracle Camp. Let me just tell you about Miracle Camp. There, just before Darlington Dam, and there's a long grey spot. I mean, and you get to the top of the hill, and it's at Janssenville Road, and we're riding, and there was just no, and all the gates, it was about our 4th day, were locked. Now, at night, we had to find a place where we could keep the horses safe, and we could sleep anywhere, but the horses had to be in a camp. But every gate was locked. And it was getting about 5 o'clock. And there in the distance, we could see a skier. I don't know if there was a photo of that. And this man, and he's a bit like my wife in that regard, he starts praying that there will be if there's a lock, that lock must be removed from the gate. We get to the gate, there's no lock. But it gets better. We go in and there's a ski, so we're making our beds outside there, and it starts raining. And there's a lock on the ski, you remember, on the gate, on the big door. And we go to it, and somehow the lock has been put in incorrectly, which allows us to open the door. And we stepped inside, and that we call Miracle Camp. And then there was no water. Remember that long stand, we didn't know how we were going to water the horses. And it rains overnight. We come out the next morning, there are puddles of water all over for the horses to drink. But just 2 things that I'd like to leave you with. And I've had a real burden for that. And we've had long discussions about buildings, Shawn and I. We have the same idea about buildings. You know, I think of where King David says, I'm living in this lovely house and the Lord must have a building. You know, remember? And then Nathan says yes. But then the Lord speaks to Nathan. And it says, where was my house when I was taking you through the desert from Egypt? I didn't have a house, I had a tent. I didn't say you must build the Lord doesn't need a building. And then, of course, Nathan tells David that. And just what Shawn said here in the beginning, that this, and I love the name Voerkraal. And the passage I just read, that and it's a constant, ongoing challenge to you as a community to support Shawn and whoever else he uses, because I do think it's important. I know sometimes he likes going out on his own. It's his own quiet time with the Lord. But that mustn't become the norm. He needs to go out with at least one other person. The Lord sent them out 2 by 2. But to provide a place for him to come back and to replenish himself, I think that's incredibly important, and this just fits in perfectly. But secondly, and most importantly, and I think most of you have been out to some of these places, we came across people who were squatting in the shacks of squatters. These are the poorest people of South Africa. The churches aren't interested in them. Hulle is weggooi mense. Shawn used to give, sometimes we used barley tow a lot on our trips. And he used to use the barley tow that had just been thrown away. But on these trips, barley tow is incredibly important and useful. And he used to use it as a picture for these weggooi people. And if people like Shawn and the rest of you who sometimes go with him don't get to those people, the established churches simply don't go out there. They've forgotten. So I would plead with you to do whatever you can to free Shawn from the maintenance that often comes with running a church and a church building. I've seen that. I've been very involved in the Methodist Church and I can see how your time gets taken up with raising funds and talking maintenance of the building. And you forget that that's not what we're there for. We're there to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to people. We get so preoccupied. It's just be cautious that Shawn remains free, because he's got a gift. Not all of us are evangelists. We're all called to witness to Jesus Christ, but we're not all evangelists. That's a gift. And Shawn has got a gift of evangelism. And just to make sure that you free him to exercise that gift and not to get caught up in maintenance. And central to that is to free him from, he feels very responsible for his family. Try and financially or whatever, try and free him from that responsibility. He can go out there and share the gospel with. In fact, these are the poorest of the poorest people I've ever seen. And half of them, you can see they've got alcohol fetal syndrome as well. So that'll be my challenge or my plea to you. And Shawn, it's been a privilege, brother. That's why we did this trip, especially up. My wife is doing something special for my birthday afterwards, so we're off to Storms River. But we came all the way, and just to be with you and Harry. And it's been a privilege to be part of it. And perhaps, I know you're 50 and it's a bit tough for you now. But at least before I'm 70, I'm not far off 70 now. So I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the invitation. Thanks, Shawn.